Welcome to American Security Council Foundation's Peace Through Strength podcast. My name is Tracy Steele, and today we'll be delving into a major shift in international diplomacy that several European nations have recently recognized a Palestinian state. What does this mean for Israeli-Palestinian relations? What does it mean for the role of the U.S. and Europe in this conflict? And what are the prospects for peace in the Middle East? Today is Lawrence Sanford, Senior Analyst with the American Security Council Foundation, and we're going to delve into this topic. So, Larry, welcome. Can you explain what this means for a country to officially recognize the Palestinian state, and why now?
My first reaction to the announcement was that this is just another sign of the Western civilization in Western Europe, of their moral decay. To recognize the state of Palestine, which doesn't exist. Can you please define the borders of Palestine? I can't. I can define the borders of Israel. I can define the borders of the West Bank, which is really Judea and Samaria. Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, I can define those borders. There are no borders for Palestine. And I would argue that Palestine doesn't even have a functioning government. Palestine consists of, to use common vernacular, the West Bank, which used to be part of Jordan until the war involving Israel. Israel won the war and they took back Judea and Samaria, which is a historical part of Israel. And we have Gaza. So Gaza and the West Bank aren't even connected. Gaza was ruled by Hamas, which won an election, and of course, usually when totalitarian entities like Hamas win an election, there's no more elections, free elections anyways. And so Hamas has ruled with the consent of the people of Gaza for 20 years. And the same thing could apply to Abbas, the president of the West Bank, Palestine, Fatah, Palestine Liberation Organization. He had an election 20 years ago, and he hasn't had one since then either. So for the Western countries, and they include UK, France, Australia, Canada, Portugal, and Belgium, to recognize the state of Palestine that doesn't exist doesn't make any sense other than it's a kowtowing to Islamic ideology and domestic political forces within the countries. Western Europe has accepted millions of Islamic immigrants, and Islam is incompatible with Western civilization. And so they have millions of people in Western Europe now whose purpose is to gradually take over the instruments of Western power and install Sharia law. They're talking about having Sharia law courts in London now. And so the number of Muslims in these countries is a very significant political force.
So is that what is making this propelling this movement forward now, this recognition of Palestine?
I think that's part of the deal. I think the domestic policies, I think there's latent anti-Semitism, especially in a country like France, the UK now. They're out against the concept of Israel existing. And when they talk about two-state solution, the Palestinians don't want a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution, namely from river to sea is their rallying cry. And that one state is Palestine, and the Jews, all 10 million of them, are eliminated, and it's all Palestine. And so one of the hues and cries is, well, the Israelis are colonizers. The greatest colonizers in the history of humankind have been the Muslims. They started off in Saudi Arabia, and look at all the countries they conquered, starting around 650 AD. So colonies, that's a real hypocrite. Jews returning to their homeland is not colonization, that's resettlement. So the whole argument about Jews not having their own homeland is fallacious. So to me, for them to recognize Palestine, and after the October 7th invasion of Israel by Hamas, is rewarding terror. And I understand what's going on, but I can't say I think it's a good idea for Western civilization to succumb to the Islamization of Western Europe and going after Israel all the time.
Yeah, we're coming up on that anniversary of that, and look what's happened. We have not made progress towards peace. That's
Peace would happen tomorrow if Hamas gave up the prisoners they took, not prisoners, hostages. And hostages is an international crime. I don't see any proceedings going on in the International Court of Justice against Hamas for breaching international law.
I was going to ask you, does this recognition of a Palestinian state have any influence on what's happening in the international court?
Other than they're going after Israel. No. And the other thing, what we're talking about going after Israel, you know, they have all these articles and media and politicians talking about the starvation in Gaza. That's a false flag. There's no starvation going on. There might be some disruptions in the supply, and that's because Hamas is commandeering the aid trucks. And the thing that's the double standard that is millions have been displaced and persecuted. In Sudan now, hundreds of thousands of people are starving, are being persecuted, are being slaughtered. Do you see anything about Sudan where Muslims are killing other Muslims going on? It's one tribe versus another tribe? No. And you have all sorts of Islamic terror going on in the Sahel, which is the Sahara, Nigeria, Mali, Burkina Faso. We don't see much in that press at all. You have to search for that. And in Nigeria, over 100,000 Christians have been killed by Muslims. And yet, we don't see anything about that, or not much anyways.
No, you really don't. How will this recognition, how should the U.S. React? What should our stance be?
We should continue the policy of recognizing that Israel deserves to live. It's a country that represents Western civilization in the Middle East. Western civilization is Judeo-Christian origin of the freedom of individuals and the value of an individual. Versus a totalitarian ideology like communism, Marxism, or Islam, totalitarianism. The individual exists for the organization. In Western democracies, the organizations exist for the individual. That's the huge simplifying version of the difference between the two. And so we should recognize what Israel is, and they're a benefactor to the United States, and we should do everything we can to support them. And this is a slight segue, but we should do the same thing with the Ukraine. Ukraine is under assault by a totalitarian thug, Vladimir Putin. We should be doing everything we can to make sure they succeed in defending their country, because if we don't, and Russia wins this whole engagement, what's next? The Baltic countries with Russian populations, Belarus, and is already a vassal state. And so the whole domino theory might be rearing its ugly head again.
So could you comment on our philosophy here at the American Security Council Foundation has been peace through strength.
Yes.
And how does that concept, how does that strategy weigh in on the situation with this recognition of a Palestinian state?
Well, I think the peace through strength is if you don't have strength, you're not going to have peace. And if you carry a big stick and talk softly, you're better off. And our philosophy is we should be strong militarily and economically so we don't have to get into war, because wars happen when there's a weakness involved. And Ukraine was perceived by Putin as to being weak, and he figured he could have a blitzkrieg come in there and take over the country in a matter of days, and he was proved wrong by the bravery and the resourcefulness of the Ukrainian people. But we really should be upping the ante for Russia to attack Ukraine. I am a firm believer in reciprocity. And so if Russia is able to bomb Ukrainian cities at will, then Ukraine should be given the weapons to bomb Russian cities at will, and maybe Putin then would come to the table. He's not going to do it now. He's just grinding away. People don't mean anything to him. He's just grinding away. And the war would stop tomorrow if China pulled the plug. So China's involved in this. North Korea's involved. And even stories of Cubans getting involved. So the whole totalitarian anti-Western world is ganging up on poor Ukraine. And we hem and haw about what we're going to send to Ukraine.
And certainly the public opinion is I think the public is very confused on what to think about Ukraine and these issues.
But you keep on hearing about the corruption, right?
Right. But when you dig deep and realize that it has tentacles in so many other countries and influences, it's
How
scary.
about the New York City corruption? How about corruption in Boston? I'm from
right
Boston.
here.
The corruption in Boston is unbelievable. So come on, give me a break.
Right here. So getting back to the issue of the Palestinian state, with so many of these European countries, I don't know how many you named, already recognizing the Palestinian state, what do you think this is a driver for other countries to join in, and what happens?
Well, right now there's approximately 156 countries that recognize Palestine as a state, out of 193 in the UN. So out of that 153, right away, 60 of them are Muslim majority. So 60 nations right away are going to recognize. And you got the others who are just going to go along with the flow, who are anti-American and anti-Semitic. So the big countries that are hanging in there are the U.S., of course, Japan, Germany, Italy. And we just saw in the last few days, Italy's having all sorts of riots because of all the Muslim immigrants rioting because Italy refuses to recognize the Palestinian state. So you get a bunch of immigrants from Islamic countries who want to change your civilization, expect trouble.
Yeah.
Well,
is there anything on that, any other comment on that topic that you'd like to add that we didn't cover?
No, I think we have to change our perception here in America and educate, and that's the purpose of American Security Council. Our mission is to educate Americans on issues of national security and economic security.
That is true.
Yeah, and if we don't hang tough, we don't perceive reality, then we're all in a deep pickle.
Yes, that is for sure. So as Larry said, education is the first line of defense, and that is one of our mottos here at the American Security Council Foundation. So be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms, which include Twitter, Facebook, Rumble, and what am I forgetting? Substack, as well as others. And you can subscribe to our newsletter and read a lot of Larry's articles on our website, which is ascf.us. So for now, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Peace Through Strength podcast.